Now loading this month's Leadership Live, where we dive in deep with today's top MedTech leaders, allowing you the chance to learn from the best. Leadership Live starts now.
Good afternoon, good morning, Floodgate family. I'm absolutely ecstatic for this edition of Leadership Live to have Keith Koby, who's the president of Germitec North America. Keith, thanks so much for taking the time and being on Leadership Live, and of course, sharing your leadership experience and knowledge with this great people. So I've gotten to know you, Keith. I've heard your stories, know what you're from, know a little bit about Germitec, but people listening aren't as lucky. So tell us a little bit about you and, of course, the great things that are happening at Germitec.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me here. A little bit about myself here. On the home front, been married 35 years and have 3 adult daughters that we're very fond of, that somehow we managed to turn out a lawyer, a doctor, and a cardiac nurse. And we're really proud of them. 3 grandchildren under the age of 4 and 2 more on the way, actually. So we're the Koby household is expanding professionally. Going back to my early career, I went to college and engineering school, and actually after my freshman year ran out of money, so I joined the Army Reserves. And as I finished that, I went into ROTC, got my commission, and as I graduated, of course, Desert Shield, Desert Storm was going on, was deployed, and spent 13 good years actually in the Army Reserves, and it was a very good career and a great learning kind of environment for me. And when I graduated college, I joined GE Healthcare right out of college, engineering school, and went to work as an engineer in X-ray and CT. After a short time of that, I went into the commercial world. And during my career at GE, had a tenure, about 16 years there at GE, had the opportunity to run and ramp up actually several businesses. It was during the heyday, right?
Yeah.
Early days of remote diagnostics and software and, basically I think I was 32 years old running a $500 million region at GE, and I used to call it like monopoly money. It was just big numbers, big businesses. And while I was raising that young family in the Army Reserves at GE, launching my career, was getting my MBA as well. So it's no wonder it took me 9 years to get my MBA, but that's a little bit about my background professionally and on the home front. And then now I'm with Germitec, and we received FDA approval back in September on a de novo clearance for a novel new device that's going to high-level disinfect ultrasound transducers, first of its kind using UVC technology.
Wow, really cool. And that infections across hospitals, way to reduce it, costs so much cost, and you guys had such a way to be able to spread, and that's such a novel solution. That's interesting to hear. And by the way, thank you for your service. I really appreciate that. I want to make sure I honor that. Now, you've been in this space at different roles, from commercial to engineering to high-level leadership roles. What do you think it takes to be a good leader? What attributes, especially in this unique med device space? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. And, I feel a little aged now, but 35 years in this medical device space. And, to be a good leader, the first thing that I've learned is you really want to serve others, right? You got to have that servant leadership type of mindset. And the other thing that I'll summarize here a little bit is you got to seek additional responsibilities. We got to know as well the types of businesses that you're in. You must know that deep domain knowledge of the business and the customers. And the ultimate goal in all of that is to earn the customer's trust, right? And then the third thing, so you want to serve others, seek additional responsibility, know the customers in the business, and then create a positive winning sales culture. And how do you do that? There's multiple steps, but you hire the right people, you set up operating processes that assist them in winning, providing clear goals for them. The other thing is, clarity produces results. So concise, clear, formal, and informal communications. Again, if you're in the commercial world, it's all about maximizing selling hours. I call them also money hours.
Yeah, for sure.
Minimizing those internal meetings that can really, recurring meetings, I think, are the death of many companies, right? You got to really, as a leader, you got to fight that urge to just fill up calendars with recurring meetings. So you maximize selling hours, minimize those internal meetings. And then the other thing that oftentimes when we're in the grind is overlooked is celebrating. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, but there's times that you got to celebrate. You got to take a step back and really, do those trips, do those meetings, and recognize people. I had a good mentor at GE once time told me about, when you start thinking you're pouring it on too thick in terms of appreciation and acknowledgement, that's probably about the right amount. So that's kind of what I think in that world.
No, that's great, and I like how it comes at, you talk about that first serve, have a serving heart, and know the space, because you care, you want to know, have that customer focus, create a structure, and celebrate when it works really well, right? And I think that's so fundamental, and especially in this space where that knowledge and care, and we're giving, done well, patients are saved, right?
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Now I'm sure you've always done it right. I'm kidding. There's probably some lessons you've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
Something you might share that others could learn from what you had to learn the hard way?
Well, there's many, many, many school of hard knocks, or 2x4s across the backside, you got to have. But one of them that comes to mind here is I was actually launching a startup team here in the U.S., commercial team, and I really wanted to essentially hire. I was maybe a little stingy on the budget, wanted to hire maybe junior reps or less experienced folks. And one of my favorite and most wise mentors I've had in my entire career told me, Keith, you might want to think about hiring more seasoned people. It'll make your life a lot easier. Now, at that time, I was hard charging and younger, and he was a little more seasoned, if you will. And at the end of the day, I'm so glad I listened to him because he was right. And at that stage in my life, I actually was young enough that I was hiring senior people that were older than me and so forth. But he was so right in that made my life easier. Now, later, I was able to hire inside salespeople that I would groom for bench strength, for filling those open roles and so forth. But that was a huge lesson learned. That he said, "Hey Keith, you sure you want to hire those younger, less experienced folks?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm so glad I listened to him, and so glad he supported me in doing that," which did increase our budget. Obviously, hiring more seasoned people. The old adage, "You get what you pay for," helped me. And then, of course, the rest is history. We succeeded and blew out the number, and I had much more degrees of freedom to expand the team. So that was a big lesson learned. And again, if he wouldn't have stepped up and took the really the initiative to coach me on that, I would have made a mistake. And so and I would have probably not done as well. So it was really good experience. Yeah.
Well, I think what's also interesting there is one, listening to advice, making sure you hear it and don't just run off. Especially when you're bullish and young and you've had some success. That's a lot of people fail. But then two, I think it's interesting talking about the type of person you need for the role at the season of the company. Because you mentioned later on, as the company grew, you were able to create a pipeline for less experience to bring in the right energy and training. But at that point where you were at first, your mentor was right. Exactly. You needed experience.
That's right.
And so it's understanding that season as well, right? Is what I heard you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And guys, I'll be asking some more questions to Keith, but I know you probably have some questions as well. Please comment below. We're going to pull those in at the end of this conversation. So please put some comments below at the end. We'll pull those in. But question for you now is, high performers drive organizations.
Yeah.
And identifying and retaining those high performers are crucial. So how do you develop those high performers? What suggestions and what have you seen done well, maybe with you or using for high performers yourself?
That's a great one too. One of the things I thought about is the relentless feedback. We just talked about that, where somebody steps in. But as I look back in my career, the times that I really grew the most was the times that I actually received really tough or difficult feedback, right? So I'm big on this relentless feedback to develop a high performer. And that means you got to be there with them. You got to observe it. You got to travel with them. You got to know them. And ultimately what that has developed in my leadership style over time is I'm probably much harder on the high performers. Number one, because I know they can take it, the direct feedback, and it helped me. So my mindset is I'm not being hard or harsh. I'm being direct, but it's also going to help them. And that's the attitude and the heart you have, was you really want to help your team and to develop those high performers. So, I'll ask questions, debriefing, like, was that your best effort, and so forth, and or what could we have done differently to win? And let's huddle, let's learn, and let's communicate with everybody on what we learned, and so forth. And speaking of that learning, is you got to continually learn. So developing high performers, I challenge them to not know it all. Even in later seasons of their career, you still got to sharpen the sword. You got to attend seminars, read books. I mean, at any given time, I probably have 5 books going on in Audible when I'm on my bike or walking. You want to attend seminars, your professional congresses, and so forth, industry symposiums. I like to pull the high performers into developmental opportunities, taking on additional responsibilities, sometimes stretching them, leading meetings. Sometimes I'll say, hey, can you take this meeting for me? And gives them a chance to expand, spread their wings, but also an opportunity, hopefully, to shine in front of executives and the board and other people if they have that opportunity. So kind of like not hogging the stage, but, sharing that, developing those people to step in. Lots of opportunities for that when you start looking around. Every day we're so busy, we have so little margin. There's a lot of opportunity to pull people in, and really the best ones that are really ambitious, they'll want that extra responsibility. They'll embrace it. So that's kind of the really simple, kind of pragmatic way I handle it.
No, I really love that. I like the kind of make sure that you're taking the time for your high performers. It's really easy to say, oh no, they got it. Is to shape them and ask those questions. And many times you don't necessarily have to be critical. And I love that, is you just have to ask the right question.
Yeah.
What do you think you could do better? And typically your high performers are more hypercritical on themselves than anything you'd ever come up with. So you don't have to even be good. You just have to ask the question.
That's right. I find that they're the hardest critic. They are. They probably already knew, but they needed to verbalize and process and then learn from it. And then of course share that, I used to say fail fast, but you want to share what you learn from everything. And so, you're exactly right.
Yeah. And I like the second part of your point of, bringing them involved in things, giving them, access to the meetings, giving those big challenges, stepping aside, letting them rise up. I mean, I had a great mentor one time. His statement is, great people love a great challenge.
Yes.
And how do you give them that great challenge? And usually when you lose high performers, trust me, I'm a recruiter. I hear high performers all the time. You know what their biggest statement is? I don't feel challenged at what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's right? A bad place to be. Yeah.
And that's why they're looking. It's not that, comps like that's nice, but I'm don't feel challenged. That's what they seek. Right.
That's
so
right.
I think
that's great.
Some really good options there, guys. But a comment below, we'll be pulling those in a bit. So if you got any other questions, we'll be pulling those comments in. Now, finding and evaluating those new talent. This is near and dear to my heart, right? Those high performers. Tell me what's worked for you in the past. What would you recommend?
Well, I wish there was a secret recipe or an app that I can say, just use this. But I think it's the biggest thing that takes time in terms of success from a network and keeping in touch with past colleagues. My first boss when I joined GE right out of college said that the healthcare market in the U.S. is a small world, Keith. Essentially treat your customers well and treat your team well. And I was like, it didn't make sense at the time. I thought it was so massive, but 35 years later, he was right. And some of for example, some of the radiology managers I worked with in when I was an engineer, they are now in the C-suite. They've been promoted to these large IDNs and so forth. So staying in touch with your network, nurturing your network and relationships. It took me a while to not be like a rugged individual dude that didn't think he needed relationships, but you really need relationships in the industry, and you need to foster those and work them and stay in touch with people. Essentially, that's one. And the other thing that has served me really well on evaluating new talent, and again, a mentor from GE shared this with me in my younger part of my career that I love to pass on, is 3 things. He said, passion, intellect, and results. Those are the 3 things I screen for. There were times I'd have a stack of resumes and I would rate them, but I'd go through and look and talk to the person about and try to discern, do they have the passion? And this is kind of what you were saying. The ones that are not just sitting that are seeking new and greater responsibilities, that are passionate about their work, it comes out. And you can even ask them directly, what are you passionate about? And sometimes, they'll tell you it might not be their work. It could be something else, but at least they show the passion for something, and that can be developed. Number 2, intellect. Now, this is not IQ tests and things like that, although having some IQ helps and some EQ and so forth. But do they learn new things? Number 1. And what have you learned recently? What are you learning now? Because we should all be learning something continually. And then how fast can you learn and keep up, right? In this pace, holy cow, right? New technology, everything is moving so fast. People do have to be very kind of fast on the uptake in terms of learning new things and keeping up with the pace of change. So passion, intellect, and then the third one is, and it sounds simple again, but it's sometimes difficult to confirm, but it's results. Do they have a track record? What have they done? And by the way, results to me also includes, have you helped others? Have you given back? Have you, maybe taken on a formal mentoring role or a training role, something above and beyond your normal, did you meet your quota? So results to me is like building good teams and being a good team player as well.
Yeah, no, that makes, I mean, I love that. You got to stay networked, right? I mean, yeah. I tell people all the time, 83% of positions are actually found through network. Unfortunately, for guys like myself, but 83% of positions are found through network. So having that, understanding that, and I love the concept when you're evaluating that talent, look for passion. I call it intellectual curiosity that you talked about, that desire to keep learning and to drive. There's a couple of those key attributes that really, separate and allow for people to have this kind of career over time, right? And this kind of success with an organization. I think that's very valuable. Now, there's a lot of people listening to the call now, or they are watching, that want to be leaders, right? That want to take that next step, that want to advance in their current career. What would you tell them? What should they do?
That's a good one, because when you're in that position, it doesn't come fast enough, right? You want something new, you want something bigger, you want to lead a team and so forth. The best advice that I would have is perform really well where you are. That's the best way to not only get recognized, but to contribute, right? So that goes without saying. But if you want to lead people, you got to have empathy too. And carrying the bag, doing well in your role will give you so much credibility, because when you are leading that team, you'll have that, that say, hey, I carried the bag. And how challenging it can be in the commercial world and so forth. That's one. Number 2, I'd say, we touched on it earlier, seeking more responsibility. This is really important, right? It sounds easier than it is as well, but people, you just must speak up and ask for more. There were times in my career that I was in that position of not being challenged enough in an 8-hour day, for example, and I went to my boss and said, I need more. So he assigned me customer visits and different things that I was able to do at that stage of my career when it was uncommon, which led me to hone some presentation skills and work on some other things. So seeking more responsibility and asking for more responsibility is a shock to most leaders and managers when somebody comes and says, hey, I need more. That's great. So that's another way to get recognized, and actually embrace accountability, ask for more, ask for the tough assignments. I wanted to be put in situations where I could shine and prove that I can lead. Even if I wasn't an official leader or manager, I would, take on training the team or helping others and so forth. So I'll share some stories here real quick. For example, my first service manager role, they came to me and they knew I wanted more because I told them. So they said, okay, Keith, there's a not so thriving part of the country that actually has a service contract renewal rate of only 20%. And we want to put you there. We want to literally move you and your family to this small armpit of America and take over and drive it. And so we did. We literally picked up our tent stakes, moved our family, went to this small region, and that next 12 months, I drove the renewal rate to about 89%. I'll never forget it.
Wow.
And, I was reporting in every month and telling what we were doing. And from there, guess what? It led to a promotion. They pulled me back to headquarters. I took a software sales team from a couple guys in a basement, literally at GE, selling about $2 million a year in software. They said, yeah, Keith, go down there. We'll give you resources. So I hired literally 20 people, inside reps, and we sold $176 million in software. Took 18 months. So, doing this can lead to really big things. I also, later in my career there at GE, after I got more, I had a senior vice president once asked me, "What do you want to do?" Now they're coming to me saying, "What else do you want to take on?" So I took on a sales region in the middle part of the poorest part of our country. I had a team of people that were pretty down and out because it was the poorest part of our country.
Yeah.
But grew at double digits year over year for several years and had the best time of my life. One of the most developmental roles I ever took. So seeking more responsibility will lead to bigger things and better things, and really doesn't make your life boring. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, no, I love those three key attributes I heard you say, right? Is first, you got to do well with what you've got in front of you, right? That's table, like you've got to succeed there. You got to have the credibility. Yeah. You've got to be good there. Two is to be able to, lead where you have an opportunity to lead. Like look for examples where you can take on a project, etc. And then three is volunteer for the things no one else wants.
That's right.
Armpits of America, no one else wants, but you're sticking your hand up and saying, "Yeah, I will go. Send me in, coach."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly. and then executing with that same passion and intellectual curiosity and things that you talked about to have success.
Yeah.
Exactly right. That's who gets recognized. And then when things come, they go, "We got a problem. Who can solve it?" Well, how about that guy that just turned around that armpit of America territory that had 20% renewal rates? I think he could do it. Right.
And I will tell you, the other piece of that goes along with it is you do have to ask yourself before you jump into something like that. Obviously, you got to have a foundation of support at home, but you got to ask yourself literally how much can you take, and can you take more? You got to be honest with yourself. There are some people, honestly, with the margin in their life, they can't do a lot more.
That's fair.
But, so you got to assess yourself. How much time, for example, can you spend traveling? How much time can you spend away from your family, which I've sacrificed a lot there, but I had a really strong foundation at home. That will allow you to perform at that high level. So work all that out before you jump in. But I will say leading those types of situations are so rewarding in the end. So, and then the other thing, lastly,
I think that's wise, that to make sure to balance your whole life, as you make these decisions, not just your professional life. I think that's a very wise suggestion.
Yeah.
And not everyone's in the same position at the same time. You're exactly right.
Exactly. And then, coming out of that, what did you learn and how do you share that and develop others and share best practices and so forth and all that good stuff too. So helping your teammates win. Like I remember when I was a region manager, I came back and they were asking me like, "Wow, how the heck did you do that?" And there was some good lessons in that too. So it was fun. It was a great developmental thing. And like I said, it's only possible because I had a good foundation at home. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I was lucky enough to have the same. So I appreciate it. I definitely do. Guys, I have put some questions below. If you have anything, we'll be pulling those in a second. I got one last question for Keith. This is a fun one here for you. Who's your favorite superhero?
Whew, that's a good one, man. I got to say that is very cool. Well, to be honest, it's an interesting question, right? And obviously, I love the entertainment value behind a lot of superheroes. But being serious for a second is that my true hero is Jesus, right? I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm not afraid of unabashed about that. Jesus didn't wear a cape. He did conquer sin, death, and the world, and all that good stuff. But unlike a fictional hero who saved the day temporarily, and then the villain comes back in, it's eternal salvation. So that's kind of my focus, honestly. What drives me personally, he laid down his life for us. So servant leadership wise, all that. Sacrificial leadership. That's the kind of hero I want to follow. But seriously, when you talk about like a comic book type of hero, I would say Captain America. I'm a U.S. Army captain, as I said, 13 good years. I'm also a Coast Guard captain. I got my 6-pack license and I love boating. So I like the ring of captain. So Captain America would be who I would select.
Okay.
And Captain America, that selflessness, again, moral conviction. It's a kind of the same kind of the value that I strive for in my work life and my faith.
No, I love it. I mean, ultimate servant leader, to wash someone's feet, is a high aspiration and superhero to be, I don't think, and secondly, that American ethos. And being that captain and leading in a good way. I love it. So that's great.
Definitely.
I want to pull in a couple questions that people will have from the Floodgate family here. So
great.
I'll pull in. Let's see. We've got one from Renee's kind of more of a comment. Looks like Renee Chang. Passion, intellect, results are critical. So I think she's seeing those three elements as a great thing. And she earlier had a question for us. Outside of being at the elbows of your team to help them learn, what are some of the scalable systems that you've implemented to help them grow? Really good one, Renee.
Scalable systems. So, you think of some of the tools, and in the early days, I'm dating myself a bit, but, there were no, Salesforce.coms and things like that. And at GE, a lot of homegrown systems to help people keep track of things in the CRM world. So you got to have a really solid, good CRM process, and that'll help you as well. Is that kind of what you're talking about here?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, so a scalable system is just, how you put structures in. You mentioned some of that for the sales team, right? Have systems.
Yeah. Well, and what's beautiful is the clarity on these types of things and setting up an outline of a draft of what you want to accomplish and setting the vision of what we want to do. Like I tell my team early on, there's only one employee at the time. It's like, hey, here's where we're going. Here's what we want to do. We want to have a weekly meeting and only one meeting on Monday that I will ask of you. The rest of the time, I expect you to be out, in the field with customers. That was like a relief, right? So that's an operating mechanism. So you have the tools like a HubSpot or a CRM, Salesforce, and then you got to set up the operating mechanism around that, or it's just, never going to be used. And then, of course, accountability comes when you tell the team, no, we're going to use this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to send the board a report out of it every week so they see what we're doing and you're doing. So keep it up. And so I invented I call it the 24-hour rule. So within 24 hours of coming up with a new leader opportunity, you make sure it's in the CRM.
Yeah.
And then that drives accountability, that drives feedback, and that ultimately drives the pipeline and results and all that good stuff. So that's one of the things in an operating mechanism, just general rules. I got a lot of probably, I don't know what you'd call them, rules of thumb or something, but things like I do like to have all of our internal meetings I can on Mondays, because a lot of customers do not want to see a sales rep bouncing in their office on a Monday morning. So that's a good time for us to have our meetings. And there's other things like that I have set up, minimizing internal meetings. I had a mentor at GE one time tell me, Keith, if you're having a lot of internal meetings, your butts are to the customer. And I'm like, that's a great way to put it.
That's funny. I never heard that. Yeah.
So I want to clear the way to let the team be out there with customers. And that's one of the jobs of a leader, to do that. Eliminate all the static. Yeah.
No, that makes great sense. I think it's that accountability to the funnel, structurally, what are you doing to get away with it, right? Eliminating the distractions, putting them in time frames where you're not cutting into your money hours, you called it, or those productive hours, et cetera. So I think those are some great things. We only have time for one more. It looks like Brittany's got one for us here. What are some of the key metrics, KPIs you consider most critical for measuring your team?
Wow. There's a lot of things. Again, I think of these I don't know, phrases that I've used over time, but I have a pretty much a mathematical formula on what I would gauge myself if I was in their shoes, and I do it now as a team collectively, and we do some math around. It doesn't seem like much. For example, is what are the key indicators of success in a role like we're doing medical device sales? Well, the first key to success is how many contacts are you making in a week? And I've actually done this so many times that I have a little formula, and I'll say 3 to 5 meaningful engagements a week. If you're a sales rep in an average size territory in the US, will result in success. And it adds up. You could do the math on that with put a even a 50-50 chance of success on those meetings over a 48-week month or year because of holidays and vacations. Yeah. And you can come up with a number of wins you're going to have. And so now you can attach dollars to that, you can attach quotes to that, and just pivot off of that. That's something that over time I've developed with the team, and I hold them accountable. I hold myself accountable to that. Every time I see them, I'm like, hey, how many calls do you have this week? And then they know if they're on track or off track. And it includes vacation and holidays and things like that. So you don't have to be too harsh on yourself, but it is not magic. It's just grind, it's grit, it's doing it when you don't feel like doing it, getting out there, doing it again. So those types of things I like to focus on in KPIs. But ultimately, success, I feel begets success and momentum gets momentum. So, always encouraging the team to keep driving it as well. So that's the one metric that I would say KPI wise definitely would be in everybody's goals and objectives.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Keith, we've made it. It is the end of our Leadership Live. You have been absolutely exceptional. I mean, some of the nuggets that you've given to myself, I've taken a couple out of here, and I know the audience has as well. It's just been awesome. So thank you so much for joining us and being part of this and sharing your 35 years of experience.
Really thank you again. My pleasure and my honor. Great to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And if you've got other questions, post them below. We'll be monitoring it and we'll share what we can. Thank you.
Bye-bye.